as men, especially younger men, you don't think
you think you're going to live
you
forever.
think you've got 40 more years, 40,
think
50,
you're
60 more
invincible.
years to live. Yeah. Yeah. And so she was in a middle of a horrible rude awakening.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Yes. And so then she's literally wondering, how am I going to get his body back with no money?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they can't find him. There's all this red tape. There's no insurance coming. She's so frustrated, and she knows that the life that she needs is in the word of the Lord, but she's still so deep in her grief, she doesn't even want to go there.
And I can so identify with that.
Absolutely.
I have gone through times when it was a chore to read the Bible. And as Christians, we know that is life for us. But sometimes you're overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy. And I think it's easy too, even in just the day-to-day busyness of life, to not make that the priority that it needs to be. I have been so guilty of that over the years. And just confession time, this last year is the first time I've read all the way through the Bible.
Really? Wow. Yeah.
For a PK, that's probably a terrible thing to say. I'm in my mid-30s, and it was the first time I'd read all the way through it. I've read a lot of it.
Yeah.
Probably had read it all at some point or another.
In aggregate, yeah.
Yeah, but never all the way through it and chronologically. And it has changed my life. Like, I don't think I'll ever go another year without doing that, because that daily act of feeding myself spiritually has truly become my anchor on the days that I feel like I'm coming unmoored.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that, like, she calls it Nibbles of Comfort. I love how you put that in there.
Yeah.
Like, she and at this point you even recognize that there's a parallel with her physical body, because she's not wanting to eat. Mm-hmm. Grief also does that.
Grief does that. Yeah.
Where you're not physically hungry. She was spiritually hungry, but she felt like she couldn't go there yet. So she's just taking it in nibbles here and there until she feels better, because it contains
and you know what?
Life words.
If you're going through that, that's okay to nibble if that's all you can do.
Yes. If it's one small piece,
a little bite is better than nothing.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what it is. I hate when people label food as good or bad.
Yeah.
Like, if it's nourishment to your body, take what you can get when you need it.
Exactly.
As you can handle it.
Yeah.
I agree.
I totally.
So she decides that she's going to go ahead and open that word up, because she needs those life words. And when she does, she opens up, and the first thing she reads about is Pilate. And, when Joseph of Arimathea goes and requests the body, and he gives it to him, Pilate orders it released, it says. And I mean, that's what Mara is needing to happen at this point. She needs his body.
Yeah.
Because they're in limbo, right? Like, you can't have a funeral without a body. What do you do? So she and her kids are literally, for weeks at this point, are just stuck in this limbo. Plus, they've got this whole, like, the media is taking it and run with it, making it this big thing about this humanitarian that has been lost overseas. And, like, the kids are feeling like this is not even their story to tell. This is ours. He was our dad.
Exactly. Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I've never been through anything that traumatic, but I can imagine if something happened in my life that became a national sensation, that would be very intrusive in your life. I mean, you're having to grieve in front of the whole world.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah. And so, even though he continued, like, he was doing all these things that were great and glorious for the people in Africa, but his family was struggling. And so there's that dichotomy of he was this really good human, this good person, but he was maybe not the most present and great husband and dad at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And so they're struggling with that as they navigate their grief.
Yeah.
Like, the kids are struggling with it. The youngest kid, especially, he's missing his dad. Like, and we find, like, earlier that he tells his mom he had written a letter to his dad. But he didn't tell her what was in it or anything like that. And he's like, I'm sorry I didn't write it to you. And she's like, I think it's great that you wrote to your dad. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And so
it was a little thread of keeping
contact
with his dad.
Yeah. And so all of that is just a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And then she finds out he didn't actually drown.
Yes.
Weeks later. And so that's why they're having so much trouble finding the body. So do you want to tell them what happens?
Yeah. So they find out weeks later that he didn't actually die in a river. He had a canoeing accident.
He did capsize.
Yes, he capsized in a canoe, and they pulled him out, but they were in a remote village, and it took a long time to find a vehicle to transport him. And of course, it took a longer. I think it said a day,
half a day
to get to a medical, to a hospital. And by the time they got there, he was.
He didn't even make it to the hospital.
He didn't even make it there because he died in a forest fire.
They have all these raging wildfires over there.
Yeah,
and they don't even make it that far. Him and the two people that were transporting him.
They died in a forest fire. So there's really nothing left of him.
So his body has burned up.
Yeah.
That is why they cannot find it. Can you imagine how traumatic?
How traumatic.
What do you even do?
Because, when someone dies like that, it's still a little bit of comfort to have their body.
Yeah.
To where you can bury it and go.
Well, and the closure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you would have to have the closure. Like I think for a lot of people, that moment of being able to see the body in the casket, watch them close the casket, put it in the ground. That's closure.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get that.
Never going to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, about that time, a man from the company that her husband works for shows up at her house, and in the way that God works, in his divine provision.
I never get tired of seeing how God works.
Me either.
It's amazing the things that he does for us, and in the way he orchestrates it, that you're just like, wow.
Yes. And so right when she's thinking, like at this point, because when she goes to find the insurance papers, she realizes their sump pump has gone out. That's a huge cost.
Yeah.
And so she's dealing with that in the back of her mind. Well, this gentleman from Deep Wells shows up and brings her what is the first of a series of checks that she will get, because they have life insurance that pays out from the minute someone goes to work for them.
Yes. So she gets to breathe a sigh of relief.
Yes.
For once.
So that's kind of her first break.
Yeah.
But she also feels really guilty and doesn't want to spend any of it, because like her husband had to die in order for her to receive this.
Exactly. It almost feels like blood money.
Right?
Yeah.
It would.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine. There's so much of it that I'm like, how would you even deal?
Yeah. Well, and when you're going through something like that anyway, you're emotionally, you're in such a vulnerable emotional place.
Yeah.
Like I can see how like something like that would cause guilt, because he had to live in order for us to have or die in order for us to have a little bit of financial freedom.
Yes.
And then later on in the book, it talks about, I think it was around the holiday time, they all kind of get together and they sort of laugh and have fun. Well, then she goes to her son's
apologizes
and apologizes for having fun. She felt guilty for having fun.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and we all know, if my mom and dad were to, God forbid, one day die, they're going to want me to still have a happy life. They don't
want you to stop living.
No, they don't want you to stop living.
Yeah.
And all of our, but it's still that invulnerability in your emotional.
Yes.
It takes you in weird places.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
So we have some hope here.
Mm-hmm.
Things are looking up. And then she just gets hammered again, because the very next chapter, I had to go back and reread that one a couple of times, because at first I was like, this is not making sense. And I think because at that time I was also trying to do some other things with my kids. And so then I was like, I got to go back and read how that went down again.
Yeah.
Because it was so heavy.
I had to too. I was like, did I read that right?
Also, she wrote it that way on purpose, because as a mother, it would feel like that.
Yeah.
As
it would feel like you're being inundated.
Yes. So her youngest son, in his grief, accidentally, I think it was accidentally, I don't think he intended for it to go this way.
No, I don't think so.
But he accidentally overdoses on drugs and takes his own life on their patio. I cannot even imagine.
No. And I wanted to get your mother's reaction to that. Was that hard to?
It was so hard to read. It was so hard to read because my child is almost 12. Her son is 12 in this book. And she describes him as a very sensitive, emotional child. My son is very sensitive, very emotional, takes everything to heart, very sweet. Much of how she wrote Jeremy in this book reminded me of my child.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I don't know how a parent recovers.
Yeah. Yeah. And losing your husband is a horrible thing. But
yes. But they've
losing
lived
your
some life.
kids, even, I mean, is that worse to you? I know they're both horrible, but
I think I do think in a way it would be harder. Parents are not supposed to outlive our children.
exactly.
You know, and so with a spouse, at some point, you know, if you live long enough, one of you is going to go first.
Yes.
And so,
but you never think that your kids are going to go first.
Kids are going to go before you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think for me as a mother, it would be harder.
Mm-hmm.
But to be hit with that within like less than a month of losing your spouse and then your child, exactly what she does, where it says that she crawls into bed and just doesn't want to move.
Mm-hmm.
I would be the same way.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
And it would take someone like an Ashley doing what she did, to just make me move again. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I have hopes that I would be strong enough in the Lord and in my faith to go ahead and continue on.
For the rest of your kids and
for your other children, you have to. But I think the Lord also allows us space and time to grieve as we need to.
Well, Ecclesiastes says there's a time to mourn and there's a time to dance.
Yes.
I mean,
and I think this book really does a great job of showing all of that in a beautiful way. And what I think I loved most of all was how Ashley teaches Mara to find the joy and the beauty in small, everyday moments.
Yes.
And she teaches her that that's how she survived widowhood, and her own grief was like knowing that the joy is not the enemy. It's not an enemy to feel joy and appreciate beauty in grief. That's what allows you to survive the grief.
Exactly. Yeah.
It gives life.
Yeah. Well, and another topic that I wanted to hit with you as a parent is Dylan, her oldest son, had a drug problem. And I think it weren't the drugs in his.
So they thought they were.
They thought they were.
But they weren't.
Yeah. And so my first thought was, and it turned out not to be the case, but like, how would you mother feel as a mother thinking that not only did your younger son die, but it was because your older son actually accidentally got hold of some drugs. Thankfully that didn't turn out, but can you imagine? Would that make you feel resentful toward?
Well, yeah. And I think at first she kind of did go there, but then she realizes he's been making strides. And so like, there's no way that he did this. Plus, if you'll recall at the memorial service, the little boy that comes up to her and says, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I knew as soon as that happened, I was like, that's who he got the drugs from.
Yeah.
That little boy is who gave him the drugs.
Yeah. And
you don't think about that, like as a parent, you don't want to consider, like, I don't want to consider that my 12-year-old could conceivably go and get drugs from someone his own age, but he 100% could if he had a mind to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
it turns out this kid was basically a drug runner for his drug peddler
dealing
dad.
Father.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who it turns out has been abusing him for his whole life.
Yes. And one thing that really hit me about that scenario was that's a horrible situation. But again, this is demonstrative of how amazing God orchestrates things, because it was a horrible situation for their family, but in a way it helped that boy. It
brought freedom to that boy and his mother.
Because they got away from that drug dealing dad. So I'm like, tragedy, great things can come from tragedy.
Yes.
It just,
Well, and I think that also speaks to just an overall, she does a great job of tying everything back to Christ. And isn't Christ's story that it's tragic what he went through?
Yeah.
But he did it for us.
He did it for us, yeah.
Because of his great love. Like, there is no greater love. There just is not. So, yeah, I love that too.
There is so much deep truth in this book, embedded in this book.
Yes. And I think my favorite, like the quote I keep coming back to over and over that I underlined that I love so much is where they go on that walk and they decide to climb that rock. Mara and Ashley do.
Yeah.
And she says, handholds and footholds, Mara, that's all you need.
Yes.
Handholds and footholds.
Exactly.
And I thought.
And sometimes in life, that's all you have.
Sometimes that is all we have.
Yeah.
But that is all we need.
Yeah.
Something to hang on to.
Something to hang on to.
And somewhere steady to put our foot.
Mm-hmm.
And if we know the Lord, we always have a handhold. We always have a foothold.
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, after Logan dies, we do see them all choose to cling to the Lord, which I'm so thankful for, because it could have been a very different book if she had chosen to take it that way.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and one thing that I noticed, like, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, when you have that kind of adversity, are you going to be a potato or are you going to be an egg? The Bible, I mean, the book actually talks about how somehow in the middle of this, their life starts improving a little. The kids start, they start.
Yeah, her daughter settles her wild ways down. She becomes a part of the worship team.
Yeah, their grades improve. And it's like, in some sort of way, even in their lives, good came from bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And isn't that often how the Lord works? Like, he takes us, he allows, people say, why did God let this happen? Or why did God do this? God does not bring bad things to us, I don't believe.
I don't think so.
I think he allows circumstances to occur. And I also think that many times in life, our own poor decisions lead to consequences.
For sure.
And unfortunately, we are the ones that are responsible for our own decisions.
Yeah.
And being a Christian doesn't mean you never have bad things happen to you again, or that you don't have to bear the consequences of your own behavior.
Yes, because again, we live in a fallen world.
We do. And so I think often, for myself anyway, the hard times I've gone through have been where he has grown the most fruit in me.
Yes.
And so I think that's what we see happening here.
Yeah.
We see him using tragedy and a truly awful situation to pull them into his heart, into his will for their lives. Because we see Dylan, as he's working, he has to do all these community service hours to work off his probation and stuff. We see him truly, I think, find his calling.
Yes, for sure. And we get into that later in the book. One thing that kind of struck out to me that I really liked was when Ashley and Mara, they're on one of their walks, and Mara mentions that Dylan has been helping with the sound system at church, which is not something he really would have done
before.
It shows just a slight growth
his
in Dylan.
Counselor is the worship leader.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And she mentions to Ashley that she's surprised the church lets him help with the sound system, given his history with drugs and Ashley says, well, I'm surprised God lets any of us serve him with our history.
Oh my gosh.
That was so powerful to me.
It was, absolutely. I underlined it because I was like, truth.
Yeah. If the parameters of being used in the church is perfection, there would not be anyone on the stage.
Everyone's out. Your pastor's out. Your deacons are out. Your Sunday school teacher's out.
Your praise team is out.
Yeah.
I'm like, and sometimes in the church, and I'm making a broad statement here. Sometimes in the church, there's a lot of judgmentalism.
There absolutely is.
And people are the reason. Christians are a lot of times the reason why non-Christians don't want to be Christians.
Yeah, I agree.
And so, like, this was a very poignant, like, that's great.
Yeah.
God, if God, I'm surprised God lets any of us serve him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we are not.
Yeah.
We cannot be good enough. This is a conversation that I've been having a lot with Barrett. He's at an age where he's really starting to develop his own faith. And so he asks a lot of questions, and he asks a lot of hard questions. And so the other day we actually had a whole conversation about, he was talking about how the Holy Spirit was speaking to him at church. And he said, Mom, I'm really trying to do better and to be a better brother to Stella and Bellamy and to do the things that you asked me to do. And because I want to make sure I go to heaven. It was so sweet, and his heart was in such the right place. And I said, buddy, thank you. Like, I'm so proud of you that you want to live for him. But I also felt very compelled because this was something I don't think I fully grasped until I was much older, and I want him to get it now.
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I said, Barrett, you need to understand that there's nothing you can do. You can never be good enough to get to heaven.
Exactly.
Like, you can't ever be good enough to do it on your own.
Yeah, our righteousness is as filthy rags.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's good to strive for those things. It's good to want to do those things. And to be a good brother and to be a good son and to follow the Lord. But none of that is enough to get you to heaven.
Yeah.
And I said, what is it that gets you to heaven? And he goes, well, you have to ask Jesus to live in your heart. And I said, exactly. It's the free gift of salvation. And I said, you need to understand that there's nothing you could ever do that would make the Lord not love you as much as he does right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing that you could ever do that's good enough to get you into heaven, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
All of that depends on Christ and your reception of him.
Exactly.
And so I loved how you kind of see that in this story of like redemption, that she was constantly directing the reader back to the redemption of Christ.
Yes. And again, it was so subtly done
It was
that
not,
you almost don't recognize
she's not slapping
that
you
it's
in the
happening.
face with it.
And I love that. That's one thing, again, that really annoys me with Christian fiction sometimes. Sometimes you are just slapped in the face with it. And I'm like, I love the subtle approach. And it takes a good author to do that.
Yes. Yes. I felt like I was reading maybe someone's own story.
I wondered. That's one reason why I wanted to have her on. Like, I wonder what events transpired in her life.
Do you know someone who walked this road?
Yes. Or did she herself walk this road? And I hope and pray one of these days we can get her on.
Yeah,
I would love to talk to her.
I would be curious. Yes, I would love to know her. What caused, like, what was the catalyst for this book?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so yeah, all of that. It was really good. So then she moves into the holidays.
Which is the holidays are a horrible time to navigate when you're in the middle of
the holidays
grief like
are hard,
that.
even when things are good. I'll just tell you, I struggle with the holidays.
Do you?
I do. I love them, but on the other hand, I hate them.
Yeah.
And we have, because my parents are divorced and Cody's parents are divorced, we have a lot of places to go and a lot of people to see. And it is typically just a rush, a mad rush.
Yeah.
I hate that.
So do you, as a parent, do you feel the pressure to give your kids like the magical Christmas?
I used to.
You used to?
And I do still try to a point. Like, we have certain traditions, things that I love that Ashley pointed out, like what things in the holidays, instead of viewing it, she tells her, like, don't view it as the enemy.
Yes.
But find the things in it that are meaningful to you that are going to bring life.
Yes.
And so I actually have a lot of notes in that part of my book.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I need to view the holidays this way.
Yeah. And Mara even, like, she even toyed about with the holidays, we've lost 2 members of our family. Do I need to switch up Christmas? Do I need to put new ornaments on the tree?
Right.
Do I need to make Christmas look totally different?
Yes. Fair questions.
Yeah.
And so I do, to a point, I want them to have certain memories of like things we always did at Christmas, but I'm also not a super crafty mom. I'm not very good at those things. So for us, it's like we always, at some point early in the season, we try to put our tree up pretty early because we enjoy it.
Yeah.
And we leave it up most of the time longer than most people do.
Same. Yeah. Sometimes I've had mine up till March before.
Yeah. We have too.
Yeah.
In the past. So we love our tree. And so decorating the tree is kind of something we always do together and we enjoy. We watch Home Alone several times over the course of the holidays because we love it. You gotta
watch it.
It's hilarious. Yeah. And now we really love the most recent Grinch movie that just came out.
Yeah, the animated one.
The newer one, the newer animated one. And so we watch it a lot. And then this year, for the first time, my children have discovered musicals. And I have shown them Holiday Inn and White Christmas with Bing Crosby.
Oh, yeah.
And
classics.
They love them. Brett,
really?
I've fallen in love with them. And I'm so excited. So we literally, from like November until just the last few weeks, we watched those on repeat.
Oh, I love that.
Through the holiday season. And, you know, they want to, like, every time they want to make hot cocoa and popcorn and, like, do all the things. And so we do that.
Yeah.
But other than that, we don't really have a ton of just traditions other than, like, we go certain places for meals on specific days.
Yeah.
But Cody and I have really been talking a lot about trying to make the holidays less about things and more about experiences. And so one of the things we're doing is not doing as many gifts and trying to take more trips with our kids.
Well, and that's what they're going to remember.
We want them to have
half
memories.
of the gifts that you get them, although they're fun in the moment, they're not going to remember half of what they got for Christmas, but they are going to remember the places you went.
Yeah. And like 2 days later, they're discarded over there on the floor with pieces missing.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I used to struggle with that, with wanting to be like that parent and making sure that they had all the things that they wanted. It's less about that now. Like this year, I felt even kind of strange. Some of the things I bought, I was like, these are weird gifts to be getting my kids, but they're things that they loved. Like Stella loves boba tea. So I bought her own little like boba glasses and with the big straws, and I ordered her boba balls and tea she can make at home, and like none of those were super expensive.
Yeah.
But the joy on her face,
it was meaningful for her
when she opened those boxes and saw that she was going to get to brew her own tea and make her own boba tea at the house. She was thrilled.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's finding ways like that, just small, everyday memories and ways that we can bring joy and life into our kids and into our homes.
Yeah.
That's kind of the Christmas I am striving for these days. But I do love to cook. I love to cook. I love to bake. So there are certain things that I do every year make that are particular to that time of year. And that's the other side of it, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But I know you love the holidays.
I do. But the funny thing is, I do love the holidays. I had my tree down on Christmas Eve this year.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We took ours down the week after because we have such a small space now that I'm like.
Yeah. And I don't know what, like I wasn't feeling bah humbug this year, but yeah.
It just was time.
And I didn't watch as many Christmas movies as I usually do. Yeah. Like for some reason, Christmas didn't hit the way it usually does.
Cody and I said the same thing. It just did not feel.
Yeah.
Like Christmas normally
and
does.
I don't know why.
I don't know.
Do you
either.
know why?
I don't. I think for us, this season that we're in as a family, the Lord's really moved us. We talked a little bit about that, about just some of the big changes we've made as a family. And I feel like for me, it was, okay, it's good. Let's enjoy this. Let's finish the year out strong. But also, I have felt prompted, like we are moving into a new season, and you need to be ready to run into this new season.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it was just more about getting prepared for the new year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel an anticipation for this year. I don't really know what all it's bringing, but I feel like it's going to be good.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Something good's going to happen.
For me, maybe that was it. I was just ready to start the new season.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of what it's all about. Just wrapping up the new year and going into something new.
And you even kind of see that in the story. Like,
yeah,
they make it through the holidays. Nobody's, even though they think they're not gonna, she thinks it's gonna be hard. It's not. I think one thing I did want to touch on was the painting that she buys.
Yes.
That's kind of her first
Instead
big purchase.
of one of their walking trips one day, Ashley comes over and she was like,
get dressed and get
dressed, put on some nice clothes. They're somewhere different. She didn't tell her where they were going.
Right.
And so they go to this art gallery,
an opening,
and tell them about that.
And so they get to this art gallery opening. It's in this beautiful old house, it says, and they're walking through, and it's not just like paintings. There's all different types of art, like folk art and different things, which I loved. I thought that's
pottery,
super cool.
Yeah,
like old spoons that they had turned into jewelry and things like that. I think she mentioned.
Yeah.
But there is a painting that catches her eye, and it's of an older woman holding a baby. And each of the brushstrokes is shaped like a tear. And the painting is entitled "The One That Did Not Live."
Yeah.
The one who didn't live. And we learn then more about Chelsea, the daughter's story, that she had been pregnant and lost a baby. And that was still a grieving point for Mara, that she had lost her first grandchild, really, through that. And so she buys that, but she feels like she can't take it home yet. So Ashley kindly agrees to hang it in her home. But also we learned Ashley and her husband were unable to have children and had their whole infertility journey. So it was representative of some of Ashley's grief too. And Ashley tells her, what a gift, like, because Mara's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't even think how insensitive. And Ashley's like, no, that means something to me too. So I'm honored to have it in my home.
Yeah.
And I thought, what a beautiful picture of friendship again. Of like, she knows her friend needs to make this purchase. She also knows she's not quite ready to move it into her space yet.
Yeah.
So she's willing to bear that for her.
Yeah.
But
and it brings her some solace at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So around that time, we figure out that Dylan's in trouble again.
Shock of all shocks.
Shocker. I really was kind of shocked because he seems to be doing so well.
Yes.
And then she gets the text that he's in trouble, and I'm like, no, like, you're doing so good. Don't fall back. But we figure out that it's not what we think.
Yeah, we should. And I think it was right after this. They're walking home. Snow is falling.
Yes,
and I think she's walking from Ashley's house to her house or something like that. And she gets the house within view, and there's emergency vehicles. Well, that's every parent's worst nightmare. And you know, she had to be thinking, oh my gosh, what has happened now?
Yeah. What next? It's like, Lord, how much more can I take? Almost like Job.
Yeah.
Like, because, you know, if you've read the story of Job, that's a heavy, 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 heavy story. And
if there was anybody that was going to give up and die, it would have been Job.
Right.
And that's what his wife told him to do.
But she kind of reminded me of Job in a lot of ways. Like, the Lord just keeps allowing thing after thing after thing. And so it turns out Jeremy had run into the kid that sold his brother, or Dylan runs into the kid that sold Jeremy the drugs that killed him. And he pops him in the nose.
He pummeled him. Yes.
And so, you know, that's assault because Jeremy's 19.
And it goes 12. Against Dylan's probation.
He broke his probation. So there's all these things. And then also, Mara gets a company newsletter, right? I think.
Yeah, she gets a newsletter, Christmas card.
And there's a photo of the scene from Liam's truck that burned up.
Yeah.
And
which brings everything crashing down.
She just goes into an emotional tailspin.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, at this point, I was surprised she hadn't already had.
Right. Yeah.
With everything that had gone on.
How in the world is a woman still vertical?
How is she still standing upright?
Yeah.
And truly, it was the support system that she had around her. Her kids, Ashley, they were those supports holding her up.
Yeah.
You know.
But again, it all goes back in showing just how God orchestrates things, because if that newsletter hadn't come, that was sort of the common that sort of brought around the ending of the book. Like she decided, well, I'm going to go to Uganda. I want to see where my husband died.
Yes.
And none of that might have happened if she hadn't got that card.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And so I love that. Like, she takes a little vacation at the spa, she calls it. She goes to the hospital for a few days for some inpatient treatment. But you know what? If you're struggling in your mental health and you need that, take it.
Yes.
Do it.
There is such a stigma in the church about taking medication and getting
help. And there should not
with a therapist. There should not be. That is wrong.
You can love Jesus and take an antidepressant.
Absolutely.
I am living proof. I have been there. I have done that.
I have done that too.
There have been seasons in my life that I required medication to help me. Thankfully, I'm not in that season right now. I
have sat in a therapist's office and cried. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, it is so valuable.
If you're in a season in your life, there was a season, thankfully I'm not on any of that now, but there was a season in my time when I needed it. And thank God put that ministry, because I went to a Christian therapist. So
seek out the counsel that you need.
Yes. And God gives those people
wisdom. Yes.
And the desire to do that.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I would encourage any listener that if you are struggling in your mental health, if you are struggling in your physical health, and you need the help of a doctor,
it does not make you any less Christian.
Nope. Go get the help that you need.
Absolutely.
Okay. So they start a grief support group, Ashley and Mara together. I love that. And, you know, at first Mara thinks it's just Ashley's way of getting her to go, like that surely 8 years in, she's moved.
Well, and that was exactly my thought when I read it. It felt a little bit manipulative to me at first.
But I don't think it was.
No, yeah. But at first, like, that's one of those things that, like, she comes up and she was like, you know, I really feel like I need, you know, and you know what she was doing. She was trying to push Mara into that. And of course it turned out to be just, legitimate. Yeah.
Because in the meeting, the first meeting, they're like, what's the bravest thing you did? And Mara raises her hand and says, came to this meeting.
Yes.
And then Ashley raises her hand and says, I scheduled an MRI.
Which is the wrong way to tell your best friend that something's wrong.
Yes.
I would much rather my friend tell me that in private than to hear it in a group meeting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I read that, when I tell you my heart hit the floor, I just about started crying. I was like, no, Lord, you cannot take her forever friend from her at this point. She will not survive it.
She will not survive that.
She needs her.
Yeah.
And so, we move into that kind of storyline of now Ashley has this MRI. Of course, the whole family is concerned. Oh, and I guess we should wrap up Dylan's storyline. Dylan does come out of it okay. They were able to, he just got some community service hours added because that little boy's dad is the one who beat him up so badly.
Yes.
It was not Dylan.
It wasn't Dylan. Yeah.
So we're glad
for several chapters, you didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah.
And so it turns out that the reason the boy was beat up so bad was because his dad was mad at him. And so that gets him and his mother finally away from their abusive father and spouse. We're glad for that.
Yeah.
So then we move into the storyline with Ashley's MRI. She has a lesion on her brain that has been there for a long time, apparently. And they've been monitoring it. But she started having migraines in quick succession. And so, as she's navigating that and concerned about Ashley invites her to go to the beach for a little getaway.
Because she and her husband had a beach house, a condo out there.
Yeah. And she said that was her happy place. And she wanted to go. And even if Mara didn't go with her, she was going for Valentine's Day. So they go.
And Ashley and Mara needed a happy place spot at this point in their lives.
Yeah. And so I love that they did that. They took that trip together and made some memories and enjoyed their time away. And as she's there, we find that Mara is navigating this idea of potentially going to Uganda. I was kind of surprised.
I was too.
I did not ever expect that she would want to go there.
Yeah.
Or need to go there.
Yeah. Especially considering the resentment she really had for the place.
Because honestly, I think I would feel some of that same resentment of like, no, I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
That place took my husband away from me. Why would I ever want to go there?
Yeah.
But I think for her, she knew it was the only place she was maybe going to find the closure she needed.
Yes.
Because as we find out with that card that she got, what ashes they were able to obtain are in Uganda at that village.
Yes.
So, are we going to give them a spoiler about Ashley's MRI results?
Let's let them experience that.
Okay. Yeah. It's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We recommend it.
There is a happy ending.
There is a happy ending.
Yeah.
So the same day that there is that happy ending, Dylan gets a letter and we find out he's been talking to Deep Wells and he tells his mom, which he didn't tell her before because he knows she holds this resentment, but that he really feels called to go do an internship with them. And he wants to go to Uganda where his dad was. Yeah. It makes so much sense to me that he would want to go where his dad was.
Yes. It kind of brings
full circle.
It's a full circle life event.
Yeah. And so ultimately, Mara's like, I don't even know if the judges can let this happen, but they do. He's able to put together this whole, he does this whole huge community fundraiser, a 5K walk run, and she helps him with it. And I think that was so healing for both of them to work on that together.
Yes.
We watched through this time, you see Logan and Chelsea's relationship. He's the worship leader and he's also Dylan's peer counselor. But Logan and Chelsea are developing a close relationship. It's clear that they are very drawn to one another and that they're talking about future commitments, which I think is beautiful. And that's really the only romance that's in the book. And it's just this small little understated line running through it. Very sweet.
Yes.
And I loved that. That it wasn't overdone. It was just this very
innocent.
Yeah.
Young love.
Yes. Young love. So I love that. And then Mara gets a letter after Dylan gets his from Deep Wells from a woman in the village in Uganda. Telling her, it starts out that her husband was her daughter's father.
Yes.
And I'm like, what?
Yes. I was like, please do not tell me he had an affair.
Just about melted into the floor. I was like, no.
Yeah.
But then we learn what she meant was that the quote is,
but Mara didn't know this until she got down there.
Yeah.
She went all this time
thinking
with that underlying.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
he had a side piece.
Yeah. And I'm like, and I wasn't really exactly sure what that was. I'm like, was it an emotional affair? Was it a physical affair?
Right.
What was it?
So it
was kind of innocuous as to what the letter was. Very innocuous.
Yeah. And I think that's because when she's talking about the letter, she's talking about how it's written in a child's hand, but with adult words.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a language barrier, and this woman doesn't know how to write in English, but her daughter does. So her daughter's writing her words down. So I'm sure it was disjointed and probably didn't make a ton. Wasn't very fluid.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't have all the words.
Exactly. If English isn't their
primary language.
Yeah, there could be.
Yeah, a language barrier.
A language barrier.
So she tells her that your husband was my father's daughter when she had no one else to pay for her uniform at school, and when she and I both needed to know that a man could be kind. Also know that your husband had the comfort of another woman as he lay dying.
That's the part that made me go.
She caught his last words and cradled him against her chest as his fever raged. That is love. She loved him well.
Mm-hmm.
No, thank you. I don't want to know that.
I do not want to know that my husband died with his head on another woman's bosom.
Yes. I'm thinking, oh my Lord, he had some woman that.
Yeah. What kind of woman thinks the grieving wife needs to hear this?
Yes, right. But I think, again, that goes to show the cultural differences.
Yes.
Because as we learn, Mara goes ahead and schedules her flight. And she intentionally schedules it for a different time than when Dylan's going to be there. Because she feels like she needs to take this journey herself.
On her own.
Yes. Because Ashley's insistent that she'll go. Saul is insistent that he'll go. They want to be there for her, but she's very no, I need to do this on my own.
This is my journey.
And so she, gets it all set up and finally gets there. Can you imagine? I can't even imagine flying that far overseas by yourself.
I can't.
I have flown not a whole lot of times in my life, 4 or 5. And the last time I did fly alone, it was when Michaela and Dylan were moving home. Mm-hmm. So it was literally just from Oklahoma to Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had I flew to Dallas and had a layover at DFW. And then I flew from there straight to Colorado, and Michaela picked me up at the airport.
Yeah.
Even that, I was just so unsure of myself navigating DFW because it's huge.
It's huge. Yeah.
I cannot to imagine flying to a whole other country.
Yeah.
No way. Which I've never been out of the country. I have never traveled.
I have been on a cruise ship. Never.
See, I've never done that.
Yeah.
So it would be a whole new world for me.
Yeah, totally.
And so I really admired her. As a mom.
That took some courage.
That's gutsy girl.
Mm-hmm.
It really did. Yeah. So that just kind of took Mara up a few more notches in my estimation of you are one tough cookie.
Yes.
So they get there. The driver picks her up, and she finds out that he knew Liam. He's talking about him like he knows him, like he's his best friend.
Yeah.
And he's talking about Dylan and Jeremy.
He knows their kids.
Yeah.
This person in another country knows intimate details about their family.
Yes. And and you kind of get the vibe through the rest of the book, through the first part of the book, that maybe she feels like he just forgot about them.
He just forgot about them.
He went over there and was doing his work and didn't even think about them. But then we learn while she's in Uganda that he spoke about his family all the time.
Yeah. To the point that they all knew.
And they felt like they knew them.
Yeah.
And it also becomes very clear that Liam was well loved.
Yes.
In the village and in the community where he worked.
Yes. And this is where you find out that he's not only there digging wells, but he's bringing the gospel to them.
Yes. He's teaching them about Christ.
Yes.
And bringing people to the knowledge of the Lord. And so, man, that was, it was so good and also so sad. Just all of it at the same time.
Yes. Because she gets over there and she meets the woman who sent her the letter.
Wasuze.
That's
how I'm saying it.
Yeah, that's how I pronounced it.
Wasuze. And, I'm expecting this gorgeous,
exotic,
America's Next Top Model.
Yes.
And apparently she was gorgeous, but she was also 80.
Yes, she was
84,
she was
right?
the town matriarch.
She is the matriarch
the
of
village
the village.
Matriarch, yeah.
And I loved how Miss Ruchti wrote her.
Yes.
Just the grace with which she carries herself and how lovingly she embraces Mara, because it talks about how she just crushes her in a hug.
Yes.
She knows that that's what she needs at that moment.
She knows.
And then it makes so much more sense the way that other woman wrote the letter of she held him like a mother holds a child.
Yes.
As he drew his last breaths.
And in that perspective, I would love to know if that was my wife. I would love to know that somebody like that
was loving them.
Was loving my
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I felt that I cried because I was just and for me it was a mirror image of what Mara didn't get with Jeremy.
Yeah.
Because she talks about that, about how there's that whole scene when they find him, how she's cradling him, and Chelsea's like, Mom, you gotta let him go. You gotta let him go.
Yeah.
And that, I can't imagine as a mom finding my child that way and ever being able to let go.
Yeah.
And so it was, I thought, another beautiful full circle moment of tying the two storylines together.
Yeah.
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 And Masuzi tells him that, she tells Mara that, she says, the night the river took your husband, or tried to, I cradled him in my arms as if I'd given birth to him. So deep was my pain. And so great was my joy as I watched the lines of his face soften and his spirit reach out toward the hand of the Jesus he served. It was a holy moment, I assure you, Mara. Isn't that what?
That is just...
Ugh, I can't even...
It's so beautiful.
It is beautiful. And my dad says, that he's been present at a lot of deaths. And he says that when a believer goes home, there is such peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that it is not traumatic. It is not just some big, awful thing. It is peace.
Yes. And Mara needed that. Yes. She needed to know that all this trauma that her family's been through, she needed to know that he, even though it was a traumatic death,
yes,
he had someone, he didn't die alone.
Yes, that he was not alone.
He was not alone. And at the end of the day, you just,
that part probably got me more than any.
Yeah, that really tugged at my heart when I read that.
Yes, mine too. So then Wasuze gives Mara a bag of dust and ashes from the spot where Liam died, and Mara takes that to the river with her the next day to kind of lay her husband to rest. And I thought it was so fitting that she laid him to rest in the river that tried to take him, but also the river that he loved, that was, is part of the reason he was even there.
Yes. So, which again was another full circle moment.
Absolutely.
So yeah, this was just a beautifully crafted book.
Yes.
It was very rough at times. One thing though, I'm a very sensitive person too, but when I read books, I tend to not feel the emotionalism as books as much.
Oh no, not me. I do.
And it's so funny for me. Like, you hear people talk about, like, I'm in a readers group, a Christian readers book, and people are always like, oh my gosh, this is such a hilarious book. I laughed all the way through it. Or this book made me cry. I don't usually experience emotions like that when I read.
What about when you watch movies?
I do with movies. Sometimes, but not a lot. And my friend Christina and I, Christina is she's my Ashley.
Okay.
And we were talking about that one day, and I was like, it's just so weird because I am a very sensitive person and I feel things, but in books, and I was like, I just don't understand, because so many people talk about having these visceral reactions to books, and I don't have that.
Yeah.
And you know what she said? And she was like, it's because you're a writer. She said, she said, when you're writing, or when you're reading, you're dissecting what's going on, how, and I do. And like,
that's true.
As soon as she said that, I never thought of it. Like, I do, like, I have a hard time. Like, I self-edit people's books.
Can you take your writer hat off when you're reading?
No.
You can't.
It's very hard for me. Like, I'm constantly reading books and saying, ooh, I wouldn't have said that, or I wouldn't have, and I self-edit their books, like.
I don't really do that. I do notice if grammar is incorrect, or little picky things like that bother me. But
yeah,
unless it is just all the way through it, I can typically
look past
a few errors.
Yeah.
And frankly, most of the time, unless someone is self-publishing, it's going through editors, it's going through beta readers. Like, most of that stuff doesn't get through.
Yeah.
But there have been a few that I have read that have been very clearly self-published that I just can't. I was unable. I'm like, you know what? No, until you can actually write a grammatically correct sentence, no matter how engaging your thought is, I cannot do this. Like,
yes.
But that makes sense to me, what she says, that because you're a writer, you can't just divorce the story from the process.
Yes, and I never thought of that until she said that. And when she said that, it was just like, it really was like it was like an aha moment. And I was like, yeah. And it's like that, yeah. And I do find myself deconstructing people's books as I read and wondering, okay, where's this going? And before I became an author, I never did that. Like
Yeah.
I wanted to, like, I'm not one of those readers that like tries to think ahead and
Tries to figure
figure
it
out
out.
who did what, and
You were content to just let it happen.
I just wanted to flow with it and let it happen. And yeah, so yeah, I was like, that makes so much sense. It's because
Yeah.
I'm trying to dig into the technical aspects of the book as well as reading it, and I find myself, because I'm not, I've got my 7th book is coming out soon, and so I'm
Yes.
not a totally newbie author, but I'm not a Francine Rivers either. I'm still
No.
learning, and it's like, and so I find myself paying more attention to
Sure.
how do other writers
Because it
bring
really
out
is a
potential.
craft,
It is definitely a craft.
and it's a skill that you hone.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me.
That's why sometimes I have a hard time having a visceral reaction to books.
Do you feel like that it lessens the joy of reading for you in any way?
It does. It does, because like I said, I would love to just sit down and read a book and just
And
read it
not-
for the enjoyment, but I constantly find myself saying, I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have
Right.
written that like that. Or
Yeah.
or like passive voice. Passive voice drives me
You don't like
insane.
it at
Now,
all.
and I know I made the mistake in my first books because I didn't know any better. And I actually went in, like, once I knew what passive voice
Did you
was, I went in and
re-edit?
re-edited my other books to take
Did
it out.
you?
Yeah, and I'm like, how did my editors not point that out? How did
Yeah.
they not tell? But yeah, so like it is harder for me as an author to read because I can't take off my author
I
hat.
guess that makes sense. I'm gonna have to ask Jack that too.
Yeah,
Because her 3rd one just came out. I'll be curious to know if that's the same for her.
yeah, I would be interested. Yeah, and that's why I love talking to authors so much, because
Well, shared experience.
Yeah.
And shared knowledge.
yeah, and it's like, I do this, do you do that?
Yeah.
Or like, do you think like this? And like, yeah, it's just so interesting to dig into other authors' minds and
I think, I'm not an author. I don't write. I read for enjoyment, and to learn things, obviously, and for self-improvement. But I've read enough over the years and been a reader for so long and have read so many different types of books that there's very little that I don't see coming most of the time.
Yeah, I don't think there's any such thing as a unique idea anymore.
Yeah,
there's unique spins
Sure.
on a story, but yeah.
And sometimes, like, some of these twists and turns I didn't quite see coming, the very subtle things.
Yeah.
But I think that's just life, right? Like, any good author is writing from experience or from other people's experiences or things that they've heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're kind of taking that and putting their spin on it or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, even the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
But overall, I highly recommend the book.
Me too.
And I will recommend it, like, even for people that I know that might be going through grief or walking through some difficult seasons. I think this is a good read, just to help put some things in perspective, that it's okay to feel all the things that you feel, but then it's also okay to still find joy and beauty in difficult seasons. In times of loss, that doesn't mean that you're discounting the things that have happened or the experiences that you shared with the people that you love that maybe you lose. But find ways to honor them in those moments of beauty and peace that the Lord brings you.
Yes, and that's ultimately what they would want you to do.
Yeah.
If I were to die tomorrow, that's what I would want.
Absolutely.
That's what I would want those left behind to do.
Yeah. My dad says all the time that, like, when he dies, he doesn't want us to have a funeral. He wants us to have a big party.
Yeah.
Like, he wants a worship service, and then he wants us to cook a huge meal.
Let's celebrate.
Yeah. And a part of me is like, I think about I can't even imagine a world without my dad in it.
Yeah.
None of us can imagine a world without our parents in it.
We've been with them our whole life.
Exactly. Especially if you have good relationships with your parents, you can't imagine a place where they don't exist.
Yeah.
But I do love that. Like, and I told him, I was like, I'm your oldest daughter. I will do my dead level best to make sure that we have a party for you.
Yes. And that doesn't mean you may be crying the whole time.
Absolutely. But we're still going to celebrate.
And that's one thing I love about, I'm so thankful to have been raised in a family that brought me up
in the faith.
Because even in your worst times, like when you lose somebody, you can still have that glimmer of hope, more than a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, because true joy does not come from our circumstances, right?
Right.
And peace,
It's
joy
so
and
much
peace
deeper than
come
the
from
things that
Christ.
happen to you.
They come from who he is. They are the very character of God. And so when we know him and we have relationship with him, and he is our firm foundation, he is our anchor, then even in the most difficult times of loss or desperation or sickness, difficulty, even like what Melanie's walking through right now, like this is a hard thing that she's facing.
Yeah.
But I assume she knows the Lord.
She does.
Based on things that I've heard her say.
Yeah, she's got a very strong faith.
And that comes through, you know. So even in those times, this season that she's walking through, this diagnosis, God still has her, and she knows that. And like, how thankful and how blessed are we that he loves us so much to give us moments of beauty in those times that we need it the most.
Yes,
things
that
to cling
hope.
to. Yes,
Yeah.
hope.
Well, it almost feels cliche to say it now, but I don't know how people that don't have that hope, how do they survive?
I'm telling you, I had that conversation with my pastor the other day. Like, how do you not know the Lord and live life?
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
Especially with the world, you know, going back to like we were talking about bringing kids into this world. As crazy as things are out there today.
Yeah.
If I did not have a firm foundation in Christ and we're not firmly rooted in him and in the word, I would be terrified to just live.
Yeah.
And I would be, I mean, it's scary out there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, and I work at a place, I work at a university, so it's
a very secular environment.
Very secular environment.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with a guy twice. And you know, and sometimes I love my job, but sometimes I don't like working there because I'm so different than they are.
Yeah.
You know, because of my belief system. And so back a couple months ago, we had a conversation, and he was like, he said, I don't understand how you can believe in a God that lets horrible things happen to people, that lets kids die, you know, all this stuff. And just like earlier this week, he was in my office and we had that same conversation. Of course, he's a very science-minded person. And he was like, how do you do that? How can you believe in that? And I said, you know, we live in a fallen world. God doesn't make kids die. And I always say September 11th is a prime example.
Yeah.
God could have plucked those airplanes out of the sky and never let that happen, but that's not how God operates. He gives men free will.
That's right.
And that's why horrible things happen. That's why kids are abused. That's why kids are human trafficked, and you know, and just all the horrible things happen. It doesn't make God any less faithful.
No.
It's because human men are operating out of the evil that's in their hearts.
All of those things are a result of the fall.
Yes.
Sin entering the world. It's not how he designed it. It was not his initial plan. And
unfortunately, he allows it to happen.
Yeah, because he's never going to override the free will of man.
No.
Right? He is the consummate gentleman.
Yeah.
Is how my dad has always described him. Like, God is never going to force himself on you in any way. So he will never override man's free will. And so he gave Adam and Eve that same free will, and they were the one because of their fall. But you know, people will be like, well, if I had been in the garden, I would. Baloney.
Yeah.
Like, all man is fallible.
Yes.
But in his great mercy, he made a way for us to be redeemed through his son.
Yes.
And so, no, he doesn't cause it, but he has to allow it, because to do otherwise would go against his own character.
But you know, and sometimes I think God does in his providence and in his sovereignty. Sometimes he does. I mean, there's no telling how many things he has protected me from that I don't even know about.
100%.
Yeah, we just don't know. And there are some things that I mean, there are things in my life that I can see the providence of God in my life, that he protected me from that. There are a lot of things that I probably don't know about. So I'm like, you know, you can't really say God because, and I don't understand it in my human mind. I don't understand it why God would allow a 6-year-old kid,
Atrocities.
yeah, to a 6-year-old kid to die. But in His wisdom, the Bible says our days are numbered from the day before we're ever born.
That's right.
And for some reason, in His wisdom, it was in God's plan for that child to die at 6 years old of cancer.
Yeah.
We don't understand that as humans.
No.
But again, we can have the hope in knowing that
we have hope in Christ.
Yeah. God's ultimately in control, even when it doesn't feel like it.
That's right. And I think this book was a great representation of that.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely encourage you to read this book. It is a heavy read, but
well
beautiful.
Worth it. Well
it's
worth the
beautiful
journey.
book.
It is beautiful. That's the best way to describe it. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful book about friendship, too. Mm-hmm. If you like stories of strong friendships,
yes,
this is a beautiful book that represents a beautiful friendship.
A beautiful friendship. Yeah. A beautiful, godly friendship.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank God for godly friends.
Absolutely. Choose your circle well.
Yes.
That's what it all boils down to. Choose your circle well. Well, you got anything else you want to say before we head out? We have been on here for almost 3 hours.
No, we've been talking a long time.
We are. I think that's good. We'll just send this out.
A lot of content to
exactly. Well, probably we'll send this out in 3. We'll probably have a 3 video.
Oh my goodness! I'm sorry. I talked too much.
No, you didn't talk too much. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's all I want to say. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
I did too. I had so much fun. I knew this was going to go well, but it's gotten even better than I thought. So, yeah. For all you listeners out there, we thank you for sticking with us. I know in today's world, we're so saturated with content. And so I appreciate you guys listening. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Bookish Introverts Podcast. We're now on all the
Audible.
Audible, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and just recently we're now on Pandora. Working on getting us on Sirius XM.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're slowly trying to branch out. So
you have lots of options for listening.
Of options for listening. So we're gonna get off here. We thank you so much, guys, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.